It's Charlie, and today I wanted to talk to you about some different things that we see happening in our community. There's a lot of talk in our community about self-diagnosis, and we believe there are kind of actually different types of things rather than just self-diagnosis as kind of an umbrella term, um, at least when it comes to DID, but I believe for many, many disorders. Now, we're speaking on this as a professionally diagnosed dissociative identity disorder system, um, but these are just things that we have observed. And I would break it down into three different groups, three different types. There's self assessment, there's self diagnosis, and there's imposing yourself. So let's talk about the differences. Let's start out with assessment. Generally, the people who are in the self assessment sector don't claim to have it. They might claim to be exploring that diagnosis, or they might say that they're questioning that diagnosis, but they don't say that they have that diagnosis. They're often in the process of seeking professionally. They're often in the process of seeking professional help. They might even have already found a professional and be in the early stages of working with them on like tackling the diagnosis and seeing whether it's correct or not. Um, they're also actively working on ruling out other possibilities, whether it's with a professional or on their own. And they're very much in the learning stage. They're learning about this disorder, they're learning about themselves, they're learning about symptoms, and they're learning about other disorders and what else it could be. Now, let's move to self diagnosis. Um, and what I view as self diagnosis, at least when you're breaking these down into these three different sectors, people who self diagnose do claim to have it. So instead of saying they think that they might have this disorder, they say, I have this disorder. A lot of people who have self diagnosed have worked, at least in my in what we're creating as the self-diagnosis category here, they have worked with professionals in the past. If they haven't actively worked with professionals, they've done a damn lot of work to try and work with professionals in the past. They have ruled out other possibilities, they have done that work, and they are currently actively treating the symptoms of this disorder. Oftentimes, these people were in the assessment phase for a very long time, and in my opinion, self diagnosis, it would only really fall under that term if this person has really done the work, taken the time, worked with professionals, ruled out other things, and simply there are times when just diagnosis can be so expensive. And it really is not attainable for everybody, and it is a privilege. And there are times where you will work with people who are very well educated and they will confirm it for you. You will be working for a long time. You can make it through all that and say confidently, I'm dealing with this disorder, without having it on paper. So there's that segment now. So we have assessing, we have diagnosis, or self-diagnosing, and now we have imposing. Um, this, a lot of the times, I do think contains a lot of people who don't actually have the disorder. Whether or not they know that, I don't know. But I think a lot of time it's just people who haven't put in the work yet. Um, Generally, people who are imposing themselves do claim to have it. They don't say that they're exploring that possibility. They don't say that they might have this. They say, yes, I have this disorder. Um, while saying this, they have not worked with professionals and generally actively avoid trying to work with professionals. They don't make an effort to see therapists, to see psychiatrists, psychologists, um, and often are almost anti healing. Combined with that, how we've talked about how the other two are working on learning how to treat their symptoms or actively treating symptoms at home or with professionals. Oftentimes, people who are posing themselves into the community are not making any effort to actually actively treat symptoms, um, and are almost anti recovery to an extent, which we see a lot in our community and is concerning. Um, The people who fall into the imposing category have not ruled out other possibilities, have not done the work to learn about the other diagnoses that might overlap with the symptoms that they're experiencing, and instead really attach to this disorder that they decided that they had, and are kind of horse blinders to that, and not looking at other things. Oftentimes the people who fall into the imposing category spend a lot of time speaking over others, whether the others have been diagnosed or not. It's a lot of arguing about how the disorder works without actually having taken the time to learn about how this disorder works. And that brings me into the next point, that a lot of these people don't often actually take the time to learn about this disorder and how it works and how, like, the science behind it and the studies behind it. It's more of learning the very surface level things about it, attaching to that, and then making that narrative of their interpretation of the surface level things fit what they claim to have, rather than learning about that disorder and how it might be affecting them. Now, I know that this might bring up a lot of people being like, oh, we have so much with people fake claiming in our community, and that is an issue. We also have a huge issue in our community with people faking this disorder, and that should not be overlooked just because the way that people handle that is oftentimes really bad and really messy and causes much more harm than good. But that being said, we need to become more attentive. In my opinion, we need to become more attentive and more intentional with our language around people who have not been professionally diagnosed yet, because self-diagnosis has become almost like a bad word. And there are people who have really done the work and really know that this is what they're dealing with, and have made the efforts, have spoken with professionals, have done everything they can, and just at this point it's not worth shelling out the $1,000, or they don't have the ability to shell out the $1,000 for the specific specialist to diagnose them. We live in a capitalistic society. It sucks. But there really are these different groups and these different states that lie within the self-diagnosis umbrella. So we just kind of wanted to break it down today into how we see it. And I think that oftentimes the self-assessing will lead into self-diagnosing, unless the professional diagnosis process unless getting a professional diagnosis is able to happen expediently, which for a lot of systems it's not. So what I would like people to hopefully take away from this is recognize that not everyone, just because they fall under one term, not everyone is going to be the same within that. Everyone has their own place that they're at. And I hope that if you are hearing things in this that sound like yourself in the imposing category, that you take a second and recognize that, like, you might very well have this, you might not. We're not mad at you. But it's time for you to recognize that those things you're realizing that is the state that you're in, and really take the time to do some self-reflection on whether you're prepared and ready to do the actual work to really verify whether or not you have this diagnosis, and then do the work that it actually takes to work on healing from it. Or recognize that this might not actually be the thing that you're dealing with. Because the tricky thing is that when people are in the imposing stage, not stage. It's not a stage. It's not linear. When people are in the imposing state, and then decide to be vocal about it, we end up having a lot of issues in our community with people glorifying this disorder, with people making light of this disorder, romanticizing it, with people really speaking very flippantly about it. And this is not an easy thing. And it's a really dark thing. And it's really hard to live with. And it's not okay to be doing that. But that being said, if that's where you've been at, you're not a bad person. Just please do that self-reflection. Take that time. I hope everyone who watches this, if you have DID or think you might have DID or anything, figure out what you relate to in these different categories and where you want to be and what you can do to get to where you want to be. Dissociation, dude. When it comes to how you interact with the community, not just where you're at yourself. Does that make sense? And like, we find things regularly that we're doing that we're like, okay, I'm speaking really like passionately about this, but honestly, I need to refresh myself on some of this, like some of the actual studies and what's updated about it and everything, because it's really easy to just hear people that you trust talking about something and then just parrot it. And that's how we get really, really messy games of telephone, especially in this community where it's a disorder that's not talked about enough, that people will just listen to pretty much anyone as an authority on it, because there aren't that many like real authorities on this speaking about it. So we just gotta remember as a community to keep our eyes open and our ears open, and to keep learning and working together, and working to not impose ourselves, but rather do the work ourselves and share our experiences, and also recognize our flaws when we have them, and work on correcting them and being the members of the community that we want to be. Yeah. I'm a little dissociated now, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm gonna call that good for this video. I hope you have a wonderful day. Oh, the mouse isn't working.